correct the record. Great to have you both here tonight.
Nice to be here. Merry Christmas.
Friday before the holiday. Merry Christmas to both of you, too. And President Trump says Merry Christmas to America. But Isaac, he says you guys want to raise taxes and complain.
Well, that's not true. In fact, I'd point out that the tax cut that working people are going to get at the beginning of this program, 80% of Americans, 85% of Americans are going to get about a 2% tax rebate. That's in the neighborhood of what Obama gave in the payroll tax. So obviously Democrats are for middle-class tax increases. What Trump gave is about the size of what Obama gave. The problem is that the overwhelming majority of the tax cut is going to the wealthiest 1% and the largest corporations in America, and that those tax cuts are permanent, and the tax cuts for middle-income Americans are not permanent. In fact, their taxes are going to increase in about 10 years, and that's where we see the big line.
Only if Democrats vote to let them increase.
No, that's not true. They set up the expiration date. It expires.
Right, it does, but then at that point, lawmakers on the Hill will have to decide, no matter who's in charge, Republicans,
and we've seen that happen. And
what's going to happen?
We've seen that happen with the Bush tax cuts. Democrats had to reckon with that, and the tax cuts were kept. So now you have a situation where, of course, the individual tax rates, because of budgetary mechanisms in the Senate, that's the only reason this structure exists. Republicans would have made it permanent otherwise. The key here with the corporate tax cuts, the reason they exist, the president saying this is rocket fuel for the economy, that this is an essential thing to do, and especially as it relates to sort of the international field. Think about this. Globally, it's about 23%, the average corporate tax rate. The United States, up until this week, was at 35%. Now we're going down to 21%. It actually makes the United States more competitive than the average country.
Let me correct the technical point there, though, about the Senate procedure. They actually waived the Senate procedure that's called PAYGO, that says if you're going to increase the deficit with things like tax cuts that we don't have the money for, that you have to find a way to offset it. Republicans actually broke the rules and voted to waive the rules of PAYGO and put those off, because right now we are $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion in the hole to pay for these corporate tax breaks, like $6 billion to Goldman Sachs, $38 billion to Pfizer, the drug company.
Where was the concern, though, over the last 8 years of raising the deficit like $13 trillion while Democrats were in charge?
Democrats have done a better job of balancing the budget over the years than Republicans. I would remind you,
$13 trillion in the last 8 years.
The last balanced budget that we had, the last budget surplus, was under a Democrat, and it was passed in the U.S. Senate with every single Democrat vote and every Republican voting against it. The problem we had over the last 13 years were the result of the George Bush tax cut, that we didn't have the money to pay for.
Okay, but we have to talk about what's happened over the last administration, because if the Democrats weren't out there railing and bellyaching and crying and sounding the alarm over the massive
belly and
trillions.
cry. We use calculators. That's the problem.
But if we weren't doing that during the period where we got 13 more of an addition to the deficit that we had in all previous presidents combined over the last 8 years, where was the Democrat concern then?
The Democrat concern has been trying to balance the budget. These are the same Democrats who said the Bush tax cut was a problem, who said we should pay for it, who said that we ought to have the money to pay for things before we spend it. The result was that Democrats are who pushed through PAYGO, which is supposed to say, if you're going to do something like this, you have to...
Look, the key here is I don't think Democrats have all of a sudden come to a moment where they're like, wow, the deficit's like the most important thing. We really need to deal with it. I don't think anybody credibly believes that. The reason the Democratic Party is making a case at this moment that this is all doom and gloom is because they're plummeting towards 2018. It's a bad situation electorally to have a party who's in power, the Republican Party, making sure that more people have money in their paychecks, because now Democrats who did not vote in any way for this tax bill can't claim any credit for that.
Well, right now the polling is not good for Republicans. I mean, it really...
Republicans just passed a tax cut that is going to, in 10 years, raise taxes
but let's talk about the more
53% of Americans, on 75% of the middle class, and on 100% of those
if the parties can't agree to work something out 10 years from now. But right now,
unless Democrats
right now, let's put a tax policy center, because this is a left-leaning group. As you mentioned, 80% of American households are going to get a cut. 15% are going to be unchanged. The average cut's going to be $1,600, and the top 1% right now currently pays 27% of federal taxes. They're only getting 21% of the cuts. But Vince, Republicans have not done a good job here, because the polling shows that people think this is going to be bad for them. Exactly what Isaac's saying.
It's upside down. It's totally upside down. Meaning, right now, 75% of Americans either think, or at least they did till last week, thought that they would have seen no change to their taxes, or their taxes would go up. 75%. Right. Meanwhile, 80% of Americans are actually receiving tax cuts. Now, why is that? Is because the Democratic Party and the mainstream press in concert have scrambled so much noise on this question that there's all these untruths about it, and now I think we're finally getting to the facts.
All right.
We've used calculators.
Well, there are a lot of calculators on Capitol Hill and here. By the way, we want you to stick around because there's more things to debate. And that was just the warm-up, but we feel like you're fully warmed up now,
let's
both
do
of you.
it.
Let's do it.
Vince and
Sound
Isaac,
good.
stick around. Okay. Well, President Trump is expected to sign off on a major show of support for Ukrainian forces fighting Russian-backed militants. President Trump expected to approve a $47 million package, which includes the sale of 210 anti-tank missiles, possibly the Javelin system, and 35 launch